Hello learners, welcome back to the lecture on the course of Environmental Economics. We have been talking about various ways in which the market failure which gets created in environmental economics or in case of environmental goods can get corrected. So what type of interventions can be done, like we have talked about taxation, we have talked about subsidies, we have talked about effluent charges, we have also talked about the tradable permits. Going on the same concept, today we will be taking into consideration the concept of command and control approach. So what is this command and control approach? Let us first see what are going to be the learning objectives. Of course, we'll start with understanding the concept of command and control. We'll be explaining the types of standards which are established under command and control approach. Thereafter, we'll have a look on the problems associated with this approach. Let me just show you this graphic wherein we are going to divide the public policies towards the environmental externalities which lead to market failure. So public policy are divided into one are the market-based instruments which we have been talking about and command and control which we will be talking today. In market-based instruments, we have what is called as taxes. We have talked about it, for example, the PIGU tax, we have talked about effluent charges and also the tradable permits. Today, we will be talking about something which is called as command and control, which is not a market-based instrument, but it is type of a standard which is set by the regulatory authority, which the firms are supposed to follow. So what is this command and control approach? It is a public policy approach in which the government sets certain standards which are to be followed to get a socially desirable behavior. So unlike the previous cases where the government had set certain tax rate, government had set an effluent charge, or a government decided that this is the maximum amount of emissions which you have to do, and you have to, somebody who's emitting less can sell, somebody who's emitting more can buy in form of tradable permits. They were all market-based instruments. But here standards are set, and the objective behind these standards is that we get a socially desirable behavior. Now, how is it ensured that this socially desirable behavior is followed? This behavior or the mandating of this law, this particular approach is done through a law, that is, a law is made, and then it is enforced by agencies. So a legal law or a law is set down, rules are laid down. These rules are then circulated amongst the concerned people or the concerned individuals or the concerned industrial units, and then agencies are set up which sees that these laws and these rules are followed. What we are saying is that in setting up of these standards, the basic idea is that you follow these standards, something, a desired performance you follow, and then you are not only telling them to do it morally, we are doing it by the enforcement of the law. So it's a standard which is mandated level of performance that is enforced in law. Now, how do we define formally the command and control approach? Command and control approach can be defined as a direct regulation of an industry or an activity by which legislation that states what is permitted and what is illegal. Just have a look at this definition once more. We are saying in a command and control approach, a direct regulation is set for an industry or maybe any activity. How it is set? This is set by way of a legislation or by way of a law. And then this law tells that what is permitted, that is what is legal and what is illegal. So in this case, as we can see, a command is given. A command is what? A command is the presentation of the quality standards or targets by the government authority that must be complied with. That is, the government is commanding from the industrial units or from the concerned organizations that certain quality standards have to be followed or certain targets have to be achieved. And not only achieved, they have to be complied with. And then control. Control means the part control signifies the negative sanctions that may result from non-compliance, for example, prosecution. That is, for example, let us take the quality standard. You have ISOs. We have something called as EGMA. We have FSIA. We have, let us say, ISI for pressure cookers that we buy. So if you want, if a firm which is producing pressure cookers, if it wants to sell in the market, it needs to get this ISI mark. Now, that ISI mark is given when the certain quality standards are achieved by that company which is producing these pressure cookers. So, by law, it is said that you can sell these pressure cookers by getting an ISI mark, and then that ISI mark is given only when certain performance standards are achieved. If you are failing in achieving those performance standards, then the government has a full right to prosecute you or to penalize you. There, that comes in the control part. So, in a command and control approach in environmental economics also, the government sets certain standards. For example, certain standards for emissions, certain standards for, let us say, you have Bharat state standards, which we will see later on. For example, when you buy a vehicle, so certain standards are there. Those quality standards have to be followed so that less of emissions are there in the air by those vehicles. So that is a command which is given by the government. In case you are not following that, then you are prosecuted. Another example we can take here is a very simple example. For example, when we take for our vehicles the PUC certificates, pollution under control certificates. What are they saying? That I get my vehicle checked, you see that what is the level of emissions my vehicle is making. If the emission is under control, a certificate is given to me. If, for example, that certificate is valid for, let us say, 6 months, and I am still driving my vehicle after the expiry of that certificate, then I may be challaned by the traffic police. So that is a control which is there. So in a command and control approach, by law, certain standards, certain performance standards are set for the environment. If somebody is not following those standards, or if you are not, you're showing a non-compliance, then certain actions can be taken against you. Now, command and control approach usually is talking about administrative measures, right? That is, it is the administrative measure. It is a public policy in which the administration is directly involved. So, what are these regulations? These regulations are meant for forbidding by law certain behaviors. That is, you are not allowed by law to do certain things, or you may be requiring by regulation to have certain behaviors. So, there are two ways of molding the behavior of a person. One, you are telling him you are not allowed to do this, or second, you are asking by law to do certain things. So, command and control approach can work in any of the ways, either forbidding a certain behavior which is not environmentally, socially desirable, or by making the people comply to that behavior. Examples of command and control policies, as we have just said, is, for example, stipulation of a pollution emission level. For example, when we said the PUC certificates which we generally take for our vehicles, when we, that is mandated by law that we have to take. So, if my vehicle is emitting more than what it is required by law, I may be asked to first get it corrected, and then that certificate is given to me. So, that is a stipulation which is, forbidding me to drive a vehicle which is emitting more pollution, or requiring me to have a certificate before I drive a vehicle on the road. Now, under command and control approach, the government, what does it do? One, it enacts rules and regulations, then only it is going to command. Then it institutes enforcement authorities at different levels to implement them. Why? Because government can only make rules and laws. but implementation has to come through certain agencies. So certain enforcement agencies are then given the power to see at different levels this gets implemented. For example, we have Central Pollution Control Board. So these boards are authorized to see that at what level, at the central level, what is happening. Then they may be authorizing State Pollution Control Board to look at the state level. So at different levels, whether this law is being implemented or not, is it being enforced or not, for that the government comes into picture. Then also the government places a system of fine and penalties for dealing with those cases which are violating these rules and laws. So these are the three main areas in command and control wherein the government is coming to picture. One, it is enacting rules. Second, not only it is enacting rules, it is seeing to it that those rules get enforced or implemented through designated agencies. There is an administration which is keeping in check the rules and regulations which have been formulated. Third, not only it is talking about commanding, it is also talking about controlling the behavior of the organizations, of the people, of the relevant stakeholders, that they follow the rules and regulations, and if they don't do, then placing a system of fines and penalties. Now, in the command and control approach, as we have just said, this approach relies on standards. We all know what are standards. Standard is something which is, we say this is standardized. This means it's a common set of rules which have to be followed by each one of us. So this approach is relying on setting those standards to bring improvements in environmental quality. For example, for the manufacturing activity, we have ISO standards. Those are standards. That is, if you get if you get certified for those standards, means you have automatically followed the way the quality should be maintained. So in command and control approach, we are looking at the environmental quality improvements. So certain standards are set under command and control, and these standards are meant to bring improvement in the environmental quality. These standards, as I said, are mandated level of performance which are enforced through a piece of legislation. That is, a legislation is made so that this performance level is maintained. For example, the Bharat Stage Emission Standards in India with respect to the vehicle emissions. So these set standards as to what type of engine your cars should have or the two-wheelers should have, so that the environmental quality is maintained. Now let us understand this particular approach graphically. As we have been seeing all through last 2-3 lectures, we have something called as a margin abatement cost curve, which is downward sloping. We are taking on the x-axis the emissions per year, and we are measuring in terms of rupees. Whatever cost or whatever damage we have, we are measuring in terms of rupee on the y-axis, and emissions which are being made, we are measuring on the x-axis. Marginal abatement cost is falling because as the firm emits more, it is trying to do less to reduce the pollution. So definitely the abatement cost will be less when the emissions are more. So lesser the emission, more the abatement cost, more the emissions, less the abatement cost. But the marginal damages curve is upward sloping, showing that when emissions increase, the damage to the environment also increases. Therefore, your damage curve is upward sloping. Now, let us assume we do not have any kind of a standard which is imposed. There is no public policy intervention in this case. What will happen is, because of externality, because the firms will not take these cost of emissions into their private cost, what will they try to do? They would try to emit the maximum, which is E1. So they will go to the highest level of emissions, where the marginal abatement cost is, of course, 0. But now public policy comes into picture. This marginal damage is recognized, which is being done by the emissions. And let us say the point where the marginal damage curve intersects with the marginal abatement curve, that is the level of emission which is E star. This is what is desired by the government, or the government says that you have to say, we have set a standard that emissions cannot go beyond E star. So we have set a standard. We have said that as per the standards, you have to maintain the emissions to E star. This means the firm, because this has been given in law, because it has been regulated, it has been through regulations, through laws, this government has said that this particular organization or this type of a business activity, if you are undertaking, you cannot emit more than E star. What is the current emission? The current emission is E1. So what will happen? This firm, in order to comply, because if it does not comply, there will be fines or there may be prosecution. It will have to reduce the emissions from E1 to E star. And in doing that, there is an abatement cost. If you see, if you go backwards from E1 to E star, your marginal cost is rising. Just see backwards like this, right? So this means that in order to move from the present emission level of E1 to the mandated level of E star, there is a cost which is incurred. What is this cost? This area which I am shading for you, which is given as A, is the cost of abatement or the cost of following this emission command policy. Okay, so this is how emission, when it talks about command and control approach, by setting a standard that in no case emissions should be more than E star. So all those who were emitting more will have no choice but to reduce down their level of emissions by E to E star by incurring this cost A. Right. So we have been talking about that in emission, we have types of standards. Now, what are these three types of standards that we have? One is called as an ambient standard, emission standard, and technology standard. We'll have a look at all these one by one. We'll be starting with ambient standard. What is an ambient standard? It is a qualitative dimension of the surrounding environment. That is, the environment in which we are there, wherever, for example, we are talking about a city. In this city, what should be the type of environment we should be having? So it is talking about the qualitative dimensions. Most of you must have understood from the term ambient as well. Ambient means ambience. What is the look of that place? How comfortable I am in that place. So it refers to the qualitative dimensions of the surrounding environment. What does it do? This standard sets a never exceed limit for some pollutant in the surrounding environment. So when any regulatory body or any government through public policy is setting an ambient standard, what is it saying? It is saying that in this surrounding environment, this pollutant should never exceed this limit. That is, this is the limit, highest limit to which this pollutant should be there, because beyond this, it will create not a very comfortable environment or environmentally not desired situation. So in order to have a good ambience, an ambient standard is set and it restricts the limit to which a pollutant can be emitted into the surrounding environment. For example, in India, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards are set by Central Pollution Control Board, and it sets a limit on the sulfur dioxide concentrations in the environment. That is, in a particular setting, what should be the maximum emissions of the sulfur dioxide concentration are set by the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. Why? Because through setting up this, they are creating an ambience of a good air quality. Now, moving further in the ambient standards. Now, ambient standards can be set at different level for different locations, because when we move from one local area to another area, geographically, when we move from one place to another place, the surroundings change. When the surroundings change, automatically, because it's a qualitative aspect, the quality of the surroundings is bound to change. Therefore, there can be set different levels for different locations. For example, the capital of India, Delhi, when we see every year in winter, we see that there's a lot of smog, and the government then tries to reduce the level of pollution by maybe going in for odd even scheme, asking people to work from home. So where the pollution is more, the ambient standard qualities may be different compared to another area where there is not so much pollution, the population is less, the environmental quality is different. So there the ambient quality standards may be different. So it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. These standards can be different for different locations. Hence, it becomes very useful to protect ecosystem in a way that is different from using emission standards, right? Ambient standards, as we said, set limit on the amount of pollution that can be present in a given environment. For example, we've just said that Central Pollution Board, through its body, is saying that this is the maximum amount of sulfur dioxide which can be emitted in this particular area. Okay, but the problem with ambient standards is that they cannot be enforced directly. Why they cannot be enforced directly? We'll take an example for that. Let us say there is a city where the ambient air quality standards for a particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5, is set by the Environmental Regulatory Agency. Now, these ambient standards cannot be directly enforced as these pollutants originate from various emission sources such as industrial facilities, because we are talking about how we can have a good ambience of the environment. This environment on its own is not getting polluted. It is getting polluted because emissions are coming from somewhere else. So the origin is somewhere else. So what is required is that these ambient standards are maintained by taking care of the emissions which emissions are coming from those sources. So the check has to be on those industrial facilities which are emitting these pollutants in order to maintain the ambient standard. Ambient standard on its own is not, cannot be done because ambience is getting spoiled or getting improved by the emissions. Emissions are coming from a different source. So the check is required from that source. So they emit less. When they emit less, we are able to maintain that standard which is required by law. So to ensure compliance with ambient air quality standards, regulatory agencies, therefore, what did they do? They enforce emissions regulation on these sources. So remember, ambient standards on them are indirect way of controlling the emissions. Why? Because ambient standards get deteriorate. The ambient standards can only get maintained when the emission sources are controlled. So what the regulatory body does is they control these sources of emissions, and they regulate them in such a way that the ambient standards are achieved. The second type of standard which we have in your command and control is the emission standards. What is an emission standard? Emission standard is a maximum rate of emission that is legally allowed by your source. Remember, we made that graphical example where we had taken abatement cost and damage. The way they were intersecting, we had said, let us say, E star is the maximum which any firm can emit. So an emission standard is the maximum rate of emission that is legally allowed by a source. What do? They specify the maximum permissible concentration or the quantity of specific pollutant that can be emitted per unit of activity or time by a particular source. So they are saying that you cannot emit more than E star, even though you said you were earlier emitting E1, but you cannot do it anymore. The maximum you can emit is E star. So they are putting a limit on how much, when, and how much this particular emission can be done. And unlike ambient standards, emission standards are directly applied at the source. Whereas if you remember in ambient standard, we were controlling the source of emission in order to achieve that ambient standard. But in emission standards, they are directly applied to the pollution source. Emission standards are also a type of a performance standard because they are talking about end results that are meant to be achieved by the polluters that are regulated. That is, polluter, he is being regulated and he is being asked that this is what you have to achieve. For example, standards which require farmers to reduce the use of particular pesticide below some level. For example, if the government says that you cannot use more than this much of urea per area in your farm. So what are they trying to do? They are trying to form a performance standard that less of urea should be used so that we can take care of the soil quality. So this is a emission standard. Let us just have a look a bit of the difference between ambient and emission standards, because many times there is confusion created in the mind of the learners as to what is ambient and what is emission. So let me put it in a tabular form for you. Let us first look what is an ambient standard and what is an emission standard. When we talk about ambient standard, we are saying they are set acceptable limits for pollutants. The government through rules is setting certain acceptable limits of pollutants or the environmental factors present in the surrounding air, water, soil or other media. So in this particular setup, in what type of air, what should be the quality of air, what should be the quality of water, what should be the quality of soil, certain acceptable limits are set. Those are called as ambient standards. Whereas when we talk about emission standards, what do? They specify the allowable level of pollutants that can be emitted directly from a specific source. That is, for example, a power plant, how much of this type of a pollutant this power plant can emit in the air. Okay, for example, a paper mill, how much of water chemicals it can emit in the water. So direct on the source, certain restrictions are placed, then we call it as emission standards. Then ambient standards, as we've just seen, cannot be directly enforced. Why? Because they themselves are dependent on the level of emissions which are happening. So ambient standards cannot be directly enforced, but they are serving as a benchmark for evaluating the quality of the environment. For example, we have this air quality index. It tells us that what is the quality of air in the various cities of the country or the various cities of the world. So it is just an indication of the ambience in that particular city. Whereas when you talk about an emission standard, they are directly enforced by the regulatory agencies because they are directly imposed, or these performance standards are meant for a particular polluter. So for an industrial unit, for an agriculture unit, this particular standard is set. So legally binding limits are set on the concentration of pollutants any business activity can have in a particular emission, from a particular emission source. So maybe for the same unit, there may be standards, emission standards for water, there may be emission standards for air as well. Then the third type of standards we have are called as technology standards. What are technology standards? These standards aim to incentivize the adoption of cleaner and more efficient technologies to reduce environmental pollution. Right. So, for example, we had said in the previous lecture that many times when you make tradable permits as a way of a public policy, the firms may not be encouraged to get into R&D of getting a better, greener technology. Technology standards is what comes into picture here, that the firms say that these standards are set and all those who get better, superior green technology are incentivized. So these standards are aimed to incentivize the adoption of cleaner and more efficient technology. So what does the regulator does in this case? The regulator is able to specify the technological steps that a firm should take to control pollution. So in contrast to the emission standards, technology standards are impose on polluters certain decisions and technologies to be used. For example, if we say, let us say when we are buying certain electronic equipment which are emitting, we talk about energy efficiency, you have certain stars which are given. So then maybe the producers are told that you have to make these consumer durables in such a way that they emit, you use this technology so that they emit least possible energy or they emit least possible pollutants in the system. So they are technology standards. Many technology standards we see, for example, we talk about green technology, we talk about hydrogen fuel. So the government is trying, or the regulatory body is trying to say that use better technology which makes environmental cleaner and in order to reduce the environmental pollution. When we talk about this command and control regulation, there are certain problems which come, even though it seems to be a very good way of getting the desired environmental quality, but it also faces certain challenges. The first challenge is that it offers no incentive to improve the quality of environment beyond the standard set by the particular law. Because we are setting a standard, we have said, okay, this is what you are required to do. Once the firm achieve that standard, they may not be encouraged to further improve on the emission part of it, or to use even a better technology, because that standard has already been achieved. So once the command and control regulation has been satisfied, polluters have a zero incentive to do better. So that's one big problem. Second is that command and control regulation is very inflexible. It usually requires same standard for all polluters and offers same pollution control technology as well. So all polluters are being asked to follow the same standard and even using the same pollution control technology. Therefore, firms do not have a reason to rethink their production methods, which might even reduce the pollution further and lower their cost. Third is that the command and control regulations are written by legislators and environmental protection agencies. And many a times it is seen that they are subject to compromises in the political process. So many times crony capitalism comes into picture. So many times the rules are bent to accommodate few politically correct people into the system. So because it is dependent on the agency, sometimes bureaucracy, red tape is in, and to a large extent, sometimes corruption also sets in when we talk about command and control regulation. Also, existing firms often argue that stricter environmental standards should not apply to them, only to new firms that wish to start production. So that is a kind of a lobby that let me be okay, the new firm should be doing all this. So because they have a certain political connections, sometimes this is used not in a very positive way. So before we move further towards the recap, let me do a small quiz with you on the command and control. I'm giving you this statement, learners. Read this statement. Say whether the statement is true or whether the statement is false. The first statement is, the command and control approach relies on the market mechanisms to regulate environmental pollution. Is it the market mechanism which is being used in the command and control approach? No. We have just seen that market-based instruments are, for example, taxes is a market-based instrument. Tradable permits are a market-based instruments. When we talk about command and control, we are talking about the role of only the role of the regulatory body. Through law enforcement, a particular standard is being set which is to be achieved. So this statement will be false. The next statement is, in the command and control approach, Regulatory agencies set specific standards and regulations for pollution control. The regulatory agencies are setting standards for pollution control. Do you think it is a correct statement or a wrong statement? It is a true statement. We've just seen it is the role of the regulatory agencies to set those standards, which may be ambient standards, emission or technology standards. Then ambient standards regulate the allowable limits of pollutants emitted directly from specific sources such as vehicle and industrial facilities. What do ambient standards do? Do they regulate the allowable limit of pollutants emitted directly from specific sources? No. We have said that ambient standards are indirect because they themselves are dependent on the emissions being done by the various pollution sources. So let's do a quick recap of command and control approach. Command and control approach of environmental regulation includes the setting up of the environmental standards for different activities. This approach is basically involve three types of standards: ambient standard, emission standard and technology standard. We have understood what is the difference between both ambient and the emission standards. But the major drawback of this command and control approach, we also call as CSE approach, is that it does not provide opportunity to the polluters for innovation, because once they reach or once they satisfy the standards which have been set by the regulatory bodies, they feel no incentive to innovate, to further improve their production process to reduce the pollutants emitted into the environment. So they have no way to there's no way to incentivize them to even improve further, because they have achieved what by law it was required to be. So that is all in the command and control approach. I hope you are enjoying these lectures. Thank you so much.